everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all well, I hope you're all safe. Today I'm going to be just running through the differences between a UK and Canadian university, differences that I noticed in my time at Western University in Ontario versus the 2 years that I spent at University of Birmingham. And yeah, there are quite a few of these actually, and even though there wasn't so many differences in terms of culture over there obviously are a few things. The academic and university system is quite different in some ways, so I think this might be interesting for some of you, especially if anyone is considering doing a year abroad and wants to know a bit more as to what it's like at a Canadian university and if it's going to be for them. I did a blog post on this a while ago, and then when I came to open the file to upload it, it was corrupt, so bringing that info back now and not letting it go to waste. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this video. And so I thought I'd start by just going over like the backstory of what I am doing at uni, etc. If any of you have came here from my work Instagram page, then you'll know this already, but just to give everyone some background. So I study American and Canadian studies with a year abroad at the University of Birmingham, and this year I'm in third year. I just got back from my year abroad, and in September of 2020 this year I'll be going back to UOB to complete my final year. And so my course is quite a small course. If I've counted correctly, I'm pretty sure there are less than 10 of us who are doing single honours, and then a couple more who do ACS joint with history or joint with English. But all in all, even with double honours, there is like less than 20 of us. And yeah, everyone on the singles honours course at least, so all of my closest friends chose to go to the US and I chose to go to Canada. And there are a few reasons why I really wanted to go to Canada for my year abroad. Actually, even though I do American and Canadian studies, we haven't done all that much of the Canadian side. It is mostly the US that we've looked at, and I was really interested in looking more into Canadian history and Canadian literature, which I definitely did on my year abroad. And yeah, I'm going to focus on the Canada side of things for my dissertation in final year now. So it was definitely a good decision. I'd never been to Canada before, whereas I've been to several places in the US and was in California for almost a month, so I've kind of lived there for a short period of time at least, so I was ready to do something different. And yeah, I absolutely loved it. I loved my time at Western University. It's a great institution, and I loved all my courses, my profs, and the people that I met there. So that's the background, I guess. And now to get into the nitty-gritty of how they are similar and how it's different. So I think I'll start straight away with some academic things that are quite different. And so obviously I'm only speaking from my experience on my course. I can't speak for every single course at UOB, but I'm talking about this. But generally speaking, at UOB, you only have maybe 2 to 3 assignments per semester. And so in my experience, I have tended to have in semester 1, the courses will be maybe 2 essays, 1 at reading week, 1 at Christmas, or 2 essays and a presentation, or sometimes just an essay, etc. And then second semester is sometimes a presentation and an exam, or just an exam, etc, etc. So as you can imagine, that means that those assessments are worth quite a sizable percentage of your overall grade, typically 50% per essay, 40%, something like that. I have had 100% exams in which the exam is worth 100% of that module, and most of my exams actually for my second semester modules have been at least 90% with a 10% presentation if they aren't 100%. So yeah, that's very different in Canada. Actually, you get assessed a lot more often in a variety of different ways, and typically speaking, because of that, the assessments will be worth a lot less of a percentage of that module. And yeah, so this can be a positive thing or less positive depending on the kind of person you are, I suppose. If you're the kind of person who will find it less stressful knowing that an assignment is worth, say, 10% as opposed to 40% that it might be worth at UOB, that might be helpful to you. If you're the kind of person who might just stress over exams anyway, I mean, maybe it's not going to be that helpful to you. Personally, I find that I get very het up over assignments anyway, and I don't put any less effort into them just because they're worth 10%. All across my year abroad, I put the same amount of effort into my essays that were worth 40%, which was the largest percentage on my year abroad, as to the things that were worth 10% or 5% even. For the film course that I did, I had 2 pieces of work that were worth 5%, and I put as much effort into those as my exam, which was worth 35%. So, you know, it just depends on the kind of person you are. Personally, I don't necessarily see it as a positive or a negative for myself. Kind of balances out. I think maybe that's because I enjoyed my module so much on my year abroad that even though there were loads of assignments, obviously it did get stressful at times, but like I enjoyed them, so it didn't really bother me too much. And so from that, I'm going to talk about the type of assessments and how that varies, because it does vary a lot. At UAB, I have only ever had assessments via presentation, essay and exam. Those are like the main ones, and I think I've done 1 research poster and like a group essay, but it's still an essay, right? So yeah, those are the only 4 methods of assessment that I've had. Whereas in Canada, it's very different. You get assessed in a variety of different ways, which is really good. It really keeps your like attention span and interest in the assignment up. Obviously, there are essays and there are exams. There are take-home exams too that obviously UAB do, but I've never had one myself. I've also been assessed through creating a film poster, writing a creative short story, a horror story, how else, doing a journal assignment. I had to do a community research project in which I went out into the community and went along to an event about Indigenous communities and lifestyles in some way, shape or form. So I went to a panel on Indigenous women and had to write a paper on that. So some of it does boil down to writing a paper, but a lot of them that I had to do were less like the typical academic papers that I've written for history or literature at UOB. They are very different. So I did a module called American Dream, American Nightmare, America in Crisis, that looked at various case studies since Trump's presidency, such as police brutality, white supremacy, the US-Mexico border, the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, climate change. And for those, a lot of them were kind of like, I don't want to say opinion pieces per se, because it was a history course. Of course, it's like you have to write in a history style, but they aren't like your typical history paper. So for one, I chose to focus on police brutality, and I had to write a speech as if I was coming in and educating a police force on like the issues of police brutality throughout history and things like that. And I also, for my women's study module that I took, I had to do a biography paper, which was like 1,000 words, in which I chose a famous or well-known LGBTQ plus figure from history and did a biography on them. And so, I mean, I can't go into all of them, I'll be here all day, but as you can see, there's a lot of variety of assessments, which personally I absolutely loved. And I will probably miss when I go back to UOB. But you obviously have to do those assignments alongside your reading and everything, going to classes as usual, as you would at UOB. So it can be a hefty workload, I won't lie. And I worked out that for my second semester alone, I had 16 assignments. From January, I think it was 7th that we went back, through to April 17th. So just to give you guys a bit of, you know, perspective into that. But yeah, so that's how kind of the assignments and things differ. And then another point I'm going to touch on is seminars and how they work. So in Canada, for most courses, for every single course I did as well, you get marks for attendance and participation. So if you go along to lectures and seminars, you get marks for being there. And if you participate, even just saying one thing per seminar, you'll get marks for that too. And it can be worth 10 to 15, sometimes 20% of your overall grade for that module. My history American studies module on Trump, I always call it, but the American Dream, American Nightmare one was 20% participation. So as you can imagine, it was a very discussion based class about Trump. You might realise that to be the case. So yeah, so participation was key. And I think me personally, I'm always talking seminars, so it's like a good way to get marks just by being there. I know some people are a bit more shy and don't like talking so much, but if that is the case, you can always message your prof. That's another thing I found. Profs are very like open and like welcoming of communication around grading and stuff, and if you aren't the type to talk much in class, just email a prof and like you can work ways around it and figure out how you can participate in different ways if you are like really anxious about talking in front of the group, because you can be in classes of 100 people sometimes. So yeah, so that's a key difference, because you don't get participation marks as far as I'm aware at UOB, or at least I certainly haven't been getting participation marks at UOB in the past in any of my modules. So yeah, and now back to seminars again, I want to talk about like structure. And so my experience at UOB and with the courses we take, which have been namely history and literature, although you can take film courses too, you typically will have like an hour lecture a week and then 2 hours of seminars, or in first year you might just have 1 hour of a seminar. Whereas in Canada, it's very different. They still have like lectures and they will call it tutorials or sections, but sometimes they're kind of merged, so it will be like part lecture, part seminar. Like it's not really quite as structured in every single module. In some of them it will be, some of them it won't. Sometimes lectures are very discussion based still, so it's very different in that sense. But one thing that is the same is that lectures or seminars or class is 50 minutes. It'll be scheduled in for an hour, but the same system as UOB works, where it is actually 50 minutes and you have then 10 minutes to get to your next lecture if you have one. So yeah, that's the same, which was nice, because I don't know if I could have coped with like 2-hour lectures right off the bat, even though you obviously do have doubles at times. But anyway, that aside, yeah, so that is the same. And yeah, people just call it class, whereas at UOB I find people are like, oh, you're going to the lecture today, you're going to the seminar. They're not like, are you coming to class? Like class feels more like a secondary school and sixth form term. I don't know, that's just me, although I now call everything class, having been in Canada for 8 months. But yeah, so yeah, I'm trying to think if there are any other differences for academics. Of a couple more, another similarity is you can still expect your paper back within 10 to 14 days. That's Western's kind of policy on when you should get it back. But actually I found that I get it back sometimes within 7 to 10 days, which is nice. But yeah, you will get it back within 2 weeks unless you hear otherwise, and there's like extenuating reasons for that, such as COVID-19, which might slow down getting grades back in some situations. And also, obviously, you might have guessed this, but just to give people some insight, there are still office hours. You can still book appointments to speak to your profs and things like that, which is really useful. I've been to office hours quite a lot in Canada, just to get to know the profs a bit better, because obviously I'm, don't know the university like a lot of the other students in my classes did. So yeah, and now this is kind of a bit of a similarity and kind of a difference too. I have had a teaching assistant in one of my first year modules at UOB, and the teaching assistant like wasn't there in lectures as far as I'm aware, and just took our seminar, and like the prof who led the course wasn't there in the seminar. That's how it worked. Whereas at Western you have TAs for every single course, teaching assistants, which is great because you can also then go to them for office hours. So if you go along and your prof is really busy and has a line of people, you can go along to the TAs office hours too. You can also email them for advice if you feel more comfortable doing that, and maybe you spoke to them a bit more or something. So yeah, so you have a TA in every single class, and they're there for the lectures and the seminars, like all of the classes, so they're as clued up as you are. They've seen everything you've seen. So yeah, but I've only had that once. So just some other similarities that are very UOB Western specific. Actually, Western's campus kind of reminds me of UOB in some ways. Like obviously we have the Green Heart at UOB and UC Hill. I mean, the clue's in the name, it's a hill, but you know, it's like a big green patch, and like it's really nice, and there's Canadian geese on there all the time. And yeah, like when it's sunny they have like concerts out on there and stuff in the snow, like people run across it in the snow, I don't know. But yeah, so that reminds me of it in some ways, and the buildings, the architecture is very beautiful at both of them. So if you're into, you know, pretty campuses and things like that, then that's a plus for both sides of the pond, I suppose. And yeah, I'd say they're kind of similar sizes actually in campus. A lot of the accommodation is a little bit closer to Western, the Vale and things like that. But then saying that, there are obviously some accommodations that are as far away as the Vale. There are just a wider selection a bit closer to campus. So where I stayed, Alumni House, is literally like a 5-minute walk and you're on campus. You like walk out, turn left over the bridge, and you have the most beautiful view of University College and UC Hill. I miss it. But yeah, and you walk over the Thames River because everything is colonial and the same name as London, but like actual London, real London in the UK. But yeah, so just some similarities in terms of atmosphere of the campus, I suppose. The atmosphere on both is so like electric and enthusiastic, like you can tell all the students like just want to be there, you know. Yeah, you won't see many black squirrels on UOB campus, but they're everywhere at Western. That's another thing. I just thought of another difference. I'll probably continue to think of more, but I'm going to wrap this video up after this. But one more difference is how residence works. So when it comes to accommodation, in Canada, you have a bunch of residences that are for first years, okay? And now exchange students can live in those too, but in terms of like Canadian students, it's just first years. So there'll be 17, because you can go to uni at 17 in Canada, or 18, typically speaking, unless they took a gap year, but that's typically the ages. And there are also upper year residences. There are 2 of them, Alumni House, where I stayed, and London Hall. And yeah, and they are for upper year students and international and exchange students. Okay, so I'd say 90% of people in my residence were exchange or international students, with a few like 2nd, 3rd, 4th years. Yeah, so that's a significant difference and something to keep in mind, because personally I didn't want to live with first years because I'm 20 and I didn't really love the idea of living with 17-18-year-olds, especially because the legal drinking age for alcohol is 19 in Ontario, and it just kind of put me off. And I mean, I don't drink, so like it wouldn't affect me, but like, you know, like underage people who want to drink and stuff, like I wasn't here for that personally, so I opted for an upper year residence. But there is the option to do that. Whereas at UOB, even though I've never lived in accommodation, from what I can gather, it's for first year students, and if you are an upper year student, you can apply to live in like a suite accommodation in Mason and various places, but it's kind of like a if it's available kind of situation. So yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it there. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, I don't think. Oh, and Canadians go to university for 4 years, whereas typically in the UK it's 3, unless you do a year abroad, and then it becomes 4. And I shouldn't say Canadians, I should say if you do your full undergrad at a Canadian university, international students will also do that undergrad for 4 years. So yeah. They also have in residence, I keep thinking of things, they have various different floors. So I know like in, I think it's Essex Hall, they have a FIMS floor, which is just for like media, film and media students. They have an LGBTQ plus hall in Ontario Hall. They have an alcohol and substance free hall in MedSid. So, you know, different things to consider. And ways to bond with people if you wanted to apply for those. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it there. I'll probably think of 1,000 other things when I wrap this up, but thank you for watching. I hope this has been useful and interesting. Whether you are a UK or Canadian student, or studying in the UK or Canada, thinking about doing an exchange, either way, hopefully this is something to think about. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely day.